Well, hello class. This video will be covering investment yield and the section for that. I don't believe you guys have to turn a written homework in on this material. I still recommend doing the homework. Any questions, come to me, email, or office hours. But that is just because we have the midterm coming up. November 12th, 1-2. So November 12th is the midterm. Make sure you are able to be there at that time. So it's going to cover everything we've covered so far in these videos. And of course, in section and in class. So all that is fair game. I recommend knowing all the topics, as you guys have seen that if you know how to do bonds, then you should know how to do everything else beforehand. But there are those little tips and tricks, just like with the sinking fund we went over. Professor Duncan, I believe, has posted all of the homework solutions. I know people are asking about that, but I've got some emails that they are now up, which is good to hear. So now let's get started. So to begin, let's go with interest rate. This is similar to one of the tables that Professor Duncan had in his notes, where we have the year of the interest rate. So let's say we start in 2015 and we use a bond. Let's see what our coupon we need to discount if it is 4 years later. So we start in 2015, our first year we discount at 5% with our coupon. And then second year we'll discount at 4.8%. And then we do 4.5% for the third year. And after that, there is not a year here, but we can go downwards and then we get to 4%. So with this chart, when it is not just the diagonal outwards, like they have the other chart where it is like this, pretty much just with squares in each box. So we have the square there, square there. Like when we have the different tables, like this one, I believe is the one in one of them he has in the notes, where it ends with a single box here and a single box here, and these should all be similar or the same. This case scenario, we go across and then down. So we get the bond. We know that at that time it's worth 4% in that year. So if we start in 2016 and we go to 4 years, we go year 1, year 2, year 3, and then year 4. So after we finish going across, we then move downwards. So now we're going to do the pretty much the main thing for this. I'd like to think for this week would be dollar weighted return and time weighted return. Now, two different things. Now we know the dollar weighted return, dollar weighted return. The formula for that is I divided by A0, which is the starting money, plus the sum of CK, which is cash flow at time K, times 1 minus TK, where T is time. So let's think about this in money. So this is the amount of money, interest we get, plus, then we divide the amount of interest we get divided by the amount we start with, plus all the cash we put into the savings account or the money that we're investing in, subtracted by the amount of time we have left for the year. So if we're in here for 3 months, let's say, if T is equal to 3 months, we know that the C of K at time 3 months would be time, and then we multiply by 9/12. So that's how much time we have left in the year. That's just because if it's not, the money isn't in the bank account as long, it shouldn't have a big an impact on compared to the rest of the money that was in there for longer. So, and we also know how we get I is equal to A1 minus, or the amount in the account at time 1, minus A0 plus C, the sum of C of K times the sum of C of K. So that's how we get our I, if you're a little bit confused. Now we also have the time weighted return. So time weighted. Another time weighted return is A0 divided by cash at time 1, or F1 as we have in the notes, multiplied by F1 plus C1, where as we know from the previous formula that C of 1 is the cash that we have at time 1, divided by F2, then multiplying by like terms, we just multiplying, just changing the subscript for A of 1 divided by F of N plus Cn. And that's just if there's a cash flow at that time, of course. So, and then we subtract 1 just to get I. Subtract 1 from this. Otherwise, we have 1 plus I is equal to this. So that's why we subtract 1. Now, as you guys see, a good way to know the difference between the time and dollar weighted return is there is no T in our time weighted return. So you may think that's a little bit counterintuitive. There is no time in our time weighted one, but there is in the dollar weighted one. So if we're using the time weighted return, remove our T. So that's the way I always remembered it. Now let's go on with an example. Our A of 0 is equal to $1,000. A of 1 is equal to 1,200. C of 1, we have 1 cash flow, is equal to 150. And C of 1 occurs at time 3/4. 3/4 through the year. So this section we use a lot with the dates and months. So I always recommend just writing January through December on the side, just so you guys can calculate the exact amount. And some even have all the way down to the days, because I know it's even when we were doing bonds, we were going down to the days in some examples. So using that is a good way to continue to go forward, just to make sure you get the exact number, because if you're 1 month off, it could, as you guys have probably seen before, it could change your whole percent by a decent percentage. So this is very important. So let's go start with our dollar weighted return. So dollar weighted. So we know our I is equal to 1,200 minus 1,000 minus 150, which is equal to 50. So we have 50 divided by, we have our A0, which is 1,000, plus the sum of CK times 1 minus TK. And we know that, since we only have 1, is equal to 150 times 1 minus 3/4. We know that is equal to 50 divided by 1,000 plus 150 divided by 4. And this will be our I from the dollar weighted return. As you see here, we do not need to subtract by 1. And that's just because we already have the numerator is significantly smaller. So we already know this is the I, unless that we know that we actually lose money. And this could technically be negative, like if we lose money during the time period. But it should always, the top should always be a lot higher here, lower here, or smaller than the denominator. Thus, this is equal to I. And unlike the time weighted return, we do not need to subtract by 1. Now let's do the same example, but with the time weighted return. So we still know that this investment comes 3/4 of the way through the year, but the time weighted return, we know that T does not belong in this formula, even though time is in the name. I know a little bit confusing, but you guys will get used to it. So we have 1,000 divided by, and we know but we have to add our F1 here, right? So we know when we invest our, let's say, or $150, our account is equal to 920 at that time. So we have our 920, and then we have 920, our F1 plus our CK of 150 divided by F2, but F2 here would be the amount that we have at that time. So the next time, or we could just do here, which is A1, just because we don't have an F2, so we know it is 1,200. But if you have an F2, you'd put that there and then put your next CK over there. But given that we only have one C of K, we can, that means our A of 1 goes on top of that. But if we had 2, then we'd have to add to an extra term. So it just depends on how many C C of Ks we have is the length of our time period. So we know this is 92 divided by 100 plus, multiplied by 1200 times 1070, and that minus 1, and that is how we get our I for the time weighted return. Okay. So now I'm just going to go over real quick the main topics we're going to need to know for the midterm, or you guys are going to need to know. So you of course need to know the time value of money. That is probably pretty easy for you guys at this point. So go from I to D to V to I to the 12th, and then all of those, and just be able to know how to go back and forth, and maybe even D to the 12th, we'll even add that, D to the 12th, know how to go to those, know those formulas. Then after that, that was like week 1. Of course, you need to know delta 2, which is, we integrate delta to get and raise it to the E to get our interest for the time period. Know the effective rate of interest formula. So effective rate of I, that is equal to the amount of money we have at time t minus the amount of time t minus 1 over A of t minus 1, where A of t is the cumulative value at time of t, or t minus 1. And then know the effective discount rate, where we just slightly change the formula. So that was pretty much week 1. Week 2 was annuities. So know A angle, A double dot, know the difference between those, know a increasing annuity, decreasing annuity, know the difference between double dot, continuous, no dot. All those are important to know. Geometric you'll need to know. That. Then we got to go to loans and then bonds. And we know loans and bonds. So we know those are pretty much summing up the annuities and our time value. This is pretty much just annuities, and this is annuities and time value of money. So if you can get bonds, you definitely have annuities and time value of money down to the most part. You definitely know how to go between the 3 different time values of money, I, D, and V. We went over that week 1, so I'm sure everyone's really good at it, but of course review it, make sure you know those formulas and what they actually mean. I'll happy to go over any of this during office hours, but I think that's good for this week's video. Don't want it to be too long because I want you to focus more on studying for the test, and good luck.